Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the Nerd Range Championship Series. We are here in Madison. We are heading into round 7 of our modern event today. This has been an excellent day of modern so far. I'm Corbin Hostler, joined by Devin Doom, Mike O'Donnell. I was here this morning with Will Hall as we took you through the beginning of the tournament. We saw some very fun decks, some new archetypes, honestly, doing well in modern. A mono red mid range list that really caught our eye. And now we are into the stretch run of the tournament. Devin, it has been an excellent day so far, and we are getting closer to that top 8.
Yeah, and we have quite a bit of Nadu in our feature match today. We kind of can't avoid it at this point. Later into the tournament, we like to feature matches that are higher stakes and playing for top 8. But we do have a non-Nadu deck on the other side, and this is going to be kind of this is sort of the rest of the tournament for me. It's Nadu versus the world. Can anybody
Right.
who didn't bring Nadu take down the Bird Menace? And we will certainly be finding that out in our feature match. We have a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah, this is actually the first time this particular deck is going to be on camera today. Dimir Murktide. For whatever reason, we haven't had it yet, mostly because there's not as many people as you might think. It was, I think, in the top. I looked at the meta this morning, top 5 or 6. But honestly, it was about 20% Nadu. If you're just coming in, it was about 20% Nadu. And then you had uh, energy variance in that 10 to 15, 10 to 12-ish percent range. And then everything else was lower. Esper, Gorios was after that. So Dimir Murktide, definitely, a top 5 or 6 deck at this tournament. Not something that has been particularly crushing it, but as we head into this round, that all might change because we are going to watch it in the hands of Christian Valenti, who is 5-1 with the deck. And in fact, 5-0 with the deck since dropping the first round, Desper Gorios. So that is what's on tap. It's going to be Christian Valenti battling with Murktide against Adam Hawthorne on, you guessed it, it's Nadu. We get to see how the matchup between two of the most popular decks in modern plays out, and we will see. We watched Nadu lose last round. We'll see if Christian's Dimir Murktide deck has what it takes. What is your take moving into this round? I guess on the state of Murktide as a deck. If we can, if I put you on the spot just a little bit, if you what you think of how that deck has kind of changed since the introduction of Modern Horizons and all of the last 6 months of Magic cards.
Well, it's a great question, and we actually do have Christian's deck list available for you, so we can kind of just take a look at that to show you how different the Murktide deck is, kind of
Hmm.
from what its predecessors essentially, because it used to be a blue-red deck, but with the introduction of recent supplemental products like Horizons 3 and Lord of the Rings, you'll notice this is now a Dimir deck for Psychic Frog and Orcish Bowmasters, which are two of the best 2-mana threats in the entire format. Psychic Frog is a card that it's funny because Frog was like very spoiled very early. And I think it wasn't like people weren't talking about it maybe as much as they should have. But the reality is the Frog just in combination with all of the removal like Fatal Push and counter spells and go for the throats and all these kinds of things, you kill their thing, attack with Frog, draw a card. And every single time you do that, you're always up a card in the exchange. And not
Yeah.
only that, that lets you kind of bridge the gap into a Murktide. And there's also this really weird synergy and this kind of cool thing that comes up where if you exile cards to Psychic Frog's flying ability, that actually pumps your Murktide as well. So you can kind of set up these weird like one-shot kills, and it's really cool. I do like this deck a lot.
Yeah, that's some nice interplay, right? It's an angle to the deck that it doesn't necessarily have before. Before it was just kind of like your generic blue red spells deck. It was almost in many ways it looked like an arc like Phoenix deck, except instead of Phoenixes, you were painting off with Murktide Regents. With the Frog, you get a little bit more of a synergy based, very clear control slant on this in a really heavily black way.
Yeah, and it almost feels to me that the black cards sort of complement the blue cards a little bit better,
Yeah.
where those black threats like Bowmaster and Psychic Frog are, I guess you could kind of argue that maybe they're comparable to Ragavan and Darcy, but they are like Ragavan and Darcy are a lot more aggressive. And it felt like the blue
Exactly.
red deck had more starts where it wanted to be an aggressive deck. But it feels like Frog and Bowmasters let you play the control mid range game a lot better than cards like Ragavan and Darcy did, because they kind of help control the board, they're larger threats and things like that. So I feel like the black cards sort of complement the, counterspell Murktide force negation package a little bit better than the red cards did.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, right? Also, the deck, a lot of its power early came from just how strong Ragavan was, right? So as Ragavan got worse, that version of the deck got worse. But Psychic Frog complements the top end of Murktide extremely well. And I think you're right. This feels much more to me like a finalized version of what a Murktide deck looks like, because it has all the pieces you'd want it to have, and it has game against everything. And it's a blue black control deck with a nice package at the top end of it. It's very powerful. That said, it's now going against Bant Nadu, which is explicitly designed to be very good against removal spells. Because even if you have removal spells for Nadu and everything else, and they don't combo you, at some point you're playing a blue black 1-for-1 removal spell deck, and your opponent is going to draw a bunch of extra cards. So it is certainly a challenge, I think, that Christian's going to be facing here going up against the top deck in the format.
Yeah, remember that thing I said earlier about kill your creature, attack with Psychic Frog, draw a card, kill your creature, attack with Psychic Frog, draw a card. You're always up a card in the exchange. All of that goes out the window when you have a Nadu in play. I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, there are ways to trade one for one, and I think Christians like this Murktide style deck probably has
Mhm.
more ways to one for one a Nadu than any other deck, just because of the counter spells and things like that. But it'll certainly be a challenge. As far as we have a little bit more time. Let's, we're here in Madison. It's a great weekend. But if you guys want to come down to some NRG action for yourselves, let's take a look and see what couple of events we have coming up for you in September 14th. We're going to Louisville. We're going to have a 10K Modern Showdown on Saturday, and we will have a 5K Standard trial on Sunday. I know that there's been a lot of buzz about Standard lately, Corbin, and I got to tell you, I've been liking Standard.
Yeah, it's fun. And I've been saying that for a while now. Standard's been good for a minute, but now we're really getting some attention to it, right? Because rotation happened for the first time in 2 years, which people always enjoy. And of course, there was an announcement about more paper play coming, and that is something everyone likes to see. Obviously, you can come to Louisville and you can play modern, you can play standard, and then we have more events after that. All of this building towards the end of the year championship. But the point is, whatever your format, we have it. The side events this weekend, right alongside the big modern event that we have going on right now, there's a big sealed event. So there is, whatever your format, you can find it at an NRG event starting next up with Louisville, September 14th and 15th. But yeah, standard, honestly, it's been really refreshing. Is probably the best way to put it. And I think it's been really enjoyable to get to have it matter again, right? Like, so much of what standard means is sort of what you make it, and having people be excited about standard is half the battle, right? Like, that's fun to me. So yeah, I've been enjoying it quite a bit on Arena.
Absolutely. And then I think after Louisville, we just a little slide for the event after that, November 2nd in Indianapolis. We're going to be doing Modern Showdown 10K on Saturday, and then a 5K Pioneer Showdown on Sunday. So, interesting to see what the Pioneer format's going to look like. We have, Duskmorn coming out right around when I think Duskmorn comes out a week before the Pioneer RC. And speaking of Pioneer, we've, been having some questions about what's going to happen to other formats, not just Modern, on this upcoming Monday, the Monday announcement. And there's been a little bit of chatter about Pioneer. Kind of tough to say exactly where the format should go from here, but I think regardless, with Duskmorn and Bloomborough as well, some interesting things to think about for Pioneer.
Pioneer is uh, in a really fascinating place, I think, because it's kind of feels like what in a way what modern did before some of the masters sets, or rather horizon sets that were aimed at addressing particular things. What you have in Pioneer is several decks that are all very powerful at doing their own goldfish against each other. And yeah, that's the format, right? Like, that's you there's a lot of it. And it's not just, people obviously are going to talk about, but it's Amalia and vampires is just, it has a Sorin Bane Ripper that made it a deck that has a powerful early game that's hard to interact with. and obviously Phoenix is just cycling through its deck, and then Nykthos is just making infinite mana, and it just kind of has a lot of decks that, uh, on the one hand, you could call them pillars of the format, but on the other hand, I don't know how many people like love them, right? So I would not be surprised. I guess like Pioneer feels like Amalia feels like a difficult deck logistically, if I recall how it led to a 7 game Pro Tour
Oh,
semifinals.
oh yeah.
So I don't know. It's Pioneer feels like people want to be excited about it or looking for a reason to be excited about it. And I think that there's new sets, and who knows what's going to happen Monday, but there's going to be, I think, more to come with the introduction as people start diving into it again, because Bloomborough definitely added some stuff. All right, I got one for you. Here's a question.
Okay. What do we got?
Let's swap over to modern just for a minute. Assuming, if we assume, if we live in a world where we believe Nadu does not exist next week, what do you think of the standout cards? Obviously, we've seen a lot of Modern Horizons 3. Do you think it's going to be that, or do you think it's like, is Yawgmoth on the comeback here? Like, what are you excited about in a post Nadu world?
Yawgmoth is a little. I'm not sure how I feel about Yawgmoth specifically. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be gravitating towards energy after Nadu goes because it's kind of the easy. It's already one of the. Obviously Nadu is in its own tier, but if you look at the tier below Nadu, there's some
Mhm.
energy, some Tron, some Through the Breach, some. Mono Black was a deck that picked up a lot of popularity and kind of fell off a little bit. I don't know where that deck went, but my guess would be there's going to be a lot of energy. That's going to be the new deck to beat or the new tier
Yeah.
1 deck. And then past that it's going to be the decks that prey on energy, which I think the Eldrazi decks with All Is Dust have a reasonable matchup against them because All Is Dust is just so good against the go wide Boros decks. I think it'll be a lot of those two decks, and then past that, maybe some mono black, maybe a little bit of maybe Jeskai Control gets a resurgence too.
Well, that's what I think that what's interesting is how good the energy package has been across decks, across archetypes, right? Because the energy control decks, and I don't, we don't have results in from today to see how everything's doing in the field, but they've been very good. And it stands to reason that they'll be very good in some kind of hypothetical post Nadu world. But on the other hand, Sun Cleanser is also a card, and now if everyone is taking 4 Harsh Mentor slots in their sideboard and turning them into Sun Cleanser spots, maybe things start to look very different. Like, that's the thing, is like things could open up and evolve in ways that we just aren't even thinking about, because we don't know what the top deck is going to be. If everyone gets to target energy with, you see it there, Sun Cleanser, you get to make them lose all their counters and they can't get them. It really, really is enough that it's, step one is energy, but we don't know what step two and step three are. And that's what's going
Yeah.
to be really fun to watch unfold.
Yeah, and the other thing last thing I want to mention real quick about that is a lot of these, I guess more specifically red decks, but a lot of decks will sort of have to dedicate very specific sideboard slots to Nadu, where you have like the Harsh Mentors, and maybe there's that's the easiest one that I can come up with off the top of my head because there's just not a lot of cards that are good against Nadu, to be honest with you. But it'll be interesting to see how those sideboard slots are now allocated now that you don't have to worry about it, assuming that it happens, of course.
Right.
Now that you don't have to worry about it anymore, maybe they can focus on, okay, well, I'm going to dedicate 1 or 2 more in sideboard slots to Jeskai, or maybe I'm going to play 1 or 2 more cards that are good against the One Ring, which is a card that Boros is notoriously bad against. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how that shakes out as well.
Yeah, it really feels like the entire modern metagame kind of froze when we had Modern Horizons 3 come out. Uh we played for about a week. Then we had the Pro Tour, and it just froze, and we were just stuck in where we're at until we're not. But it just means that basically, like, all the excitement I had just kind of got delayed, and now I'm really excited to see everything get played out after this. We don't ever talk about Ruby Storm. I can't imagine
Mm,
it's going to get any better because now no one's playing sideboard cards for it, and it's still not any good. But man,
well,
talk
yeah.
about a deck that a bunch of really good players played at a Pro Tour that just fell off the radar.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I think that I want to say it was I
Rhino,
think
maybe?
it was it LSV that wrote an article or a tweet
I
or
think
something
so.
where
Yeah.
it was the win rate was about 33%, and I think he said it was maybe the worst deck he's ever played at a pro tour,
Yeah, I think he said
if
the
I recall
worst
correctly.
position deck he's ever played at a pro tour.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, I've heard the story there. The little behind the scenes here is, and I don't know how much of this kind of stuff is exaggerated, but it's certainly a great story. As we watch Christian and Adam get off, as in the testing house, John Finkel was beating everyone with Storm, so they were like,
Yep.
"Well, I guess we should just play Storm."
Yeah,
But
but it's
then,
John Finkel, right?
yeah, that's the maybe they forgot to. John Finkel was beating everyone with Storm.
Yeah,
So yeah,
John Finkel was beating everybody with a ham sandwich. Maybe it didn't have to be Storm.
It was amazing, though.
Yeah.
Either way, the Pro Tour, of course, gave rise to Nadu, which you're watching. Adam Hawthorne pilot on your right. You got Christian Valenti on your left with Dimir Murktide. And we saw Spell Snare, an all star in early modern that's been making a huge comeback recently, hit that wall roots. And the Psychic Frog you were talking about follows up.
Yeah, Spell Snare is a card that we kind of didn't mention, in when we were talking about Christian's deck list, but there is, I think, 3 copies in Christian's deck. And, there was a period of time in Modern where maybe these control decks would play 1 copy of Spell Snare because it's good when you're on the draw. But I think the reality of the fact is, like, if you look at the 2 drops that people are playing, the Boros and Mardu decks are just loaded with twos. Amped Raptor, Goblin Bombardment, Ajani,
Mhm.
Orcish Bowmaster, Nightmare. There's just an endless number of 2 drops in these decks. And I don't think it matters. Like, the 2 drops in those decks are some of the best cards on turn 2 and turn 5 or turn 6. And you're not putting yourself in spots where Spell Snare is a dead card later in the game, similar to what it was in prior moderns.
Oh yeah, well said. Here in the board is this we're bestowing onto the halfling. Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, this is a pretty heads up play from Adam. So typically, there's I think there's against the more like highly interactive decks you want to bestow, because if Christian has a removal spell and goes to kill the halfling, you would still get to keep that Spring Hardened and go.
Right.
So that's something that Adam wants to is keeping in mind. There is an interesting decision point though if you have Court of Calling, because if you bestow, that's 1 less body or 1 less mana for Court of Calling. So there's a little bit of give and take there. Love it. Psychic Frog getting in there. 2/3
Frog.
halfling. You want to block? You want to bring it? I think Adam is content with taking the damage, most likely. I mean, it is interesting though, because even if you block with Halfling, you get 2 cards out of Christian's hand, and you still get to keep the Nantuko. So Adam, you see, he's laughing over there, but he's
Yeah, I say
definitely
this
thinking
is.
about the
They look
block.
like they're having fun at the table. I'll say that. So,
Yeah.
if you're having fun when you're playing Nadu, good for you.
All right, no blocks. Psychic Frog connecting, and Christian's going to pick up a new card. And I think I saw a Force Negation, a Sink into Stupor. Christian's hand got a lot of interaction. See if maybe he has a second threat to deploy here. A lot of fetching in Modern. That's just kind
Yeah,
of
it
the way it
also
always has
leads.
been, right?
We've been talking about.
Oh,
Ooh,
speaking of fetching,
yeah. I was gonna say let's go take a break. Talk about this Harbinger of the Seas. That's my Merfolk right there. Turns all your non-basics into islands, and what that means is Adam has 4 islands.
yeah, so it's actually pretty funny. So Blood Moon is a tactic that these, Mardu and Boros decks frequently will turn
Yeah.
to against Nadu. The problem is this is much, much worse than Blood Moon, because giving you access to blue mana means that, Adam has a bunch of islands and then can just make green off of the halfling anyways.
Yeah.
So does still have the ability to cast Nadu, so it's not quite as good as Blood Moon.
Yeah, and you also don't have the advantage of the deck where you most often see Harbinger of Merfolk, where you're going to Island Walk. We do see Force and Negation pitch to
Yep.
Psychic Frog, I imagine.
Yep, Psychic Frog
Okay.
got pitched to force a negation, and that was in the Shuko. And that was a very heads-up play from Christian. Was worried about the possibility of Adam having that Nadu, because again, as we said, the green mana from the Halfling, and if Adam does have the Nadu, you put yourself in a really bad spot if the Shuko does resolve. And presumably Christian's not going to get a ton of better targets for that force negation. So, is happy to just go ahead and make that trade. And we'll see what Christian wants to do here. There's some cards in the graveyard. Can maybe put that towards a Psychic Frog activation? Remember, I do remember that Christian had a copy of Sink into Stupor in the hand. Not exactly sure what is left over though.
Say that's a good one to sit on. Shout out to chat letting us know that Harbinger of the Seas is affectionately called Flood Moon.
Oh yeah,
I like that. I actually hadn't heard that before today, but that is excellent.
the Flood Moon.
All right, block the Might on the Frog. It looks like Christian has like 3 cards in hand, I think. So definitely something to work with here. The Might hits the graveyard. And now we'll see what Christian does. It can certainly just pass if he's sitting on Sink into Stupor.
Yeah, Adam didn't want to give up the extra card from Christian, and kind of assumes that there's not a ton of targets for that Haywire Mine anyways, so is content with just sort of gaining 2 life and effectively trading it for a random card, if that makes sense, because Christian would draw a card off of it and things like that, and makes sense against this card too, because doesn't want to have it in play for the Orcish Bowmasters, but Christian does still have a target in the form of the insect token. And that will bring along an orc army as well. We'll see what Christian wants to do next.
Honestly, this is looking pretty nice and controlled from Valenti's side, right? Like this is where you want to be. 4 turns into the game, you've got your frog working. You've got some counter magic. I mean, you're kind of just drowning out Adam here, right?
Blue-black deck drowning out another player.
With the Harbinger of the Sea in play, of course.
No drowning the locks in Christian's deck, though. It's kind of a flavor fail.
It would be pretty good in this deck, huh?
One other interesting thing that I want to bring attention to is, the Magus of the, or Magus, Harbinger of the Seas. I'm just going to call it Magus of the Seas. It's fine. Chad knows what I'm talking about. That is limiting the access to green mana. So if Adam were to draw something like a copy of Court of Calling, that is currently not castable. Unless, even if there was, I guess there would have to be a basic forest, where forest would give you a Spring Heart token, and that would give you, basic forest plus the 2 creatures. But
I was going to say he's not even close, but you're right that the landfall trigger would get you there. But he's going to need it fast because Valenti has deployed a Murktide Regent with 2 counters on it. So
still
this
good.
board is starting to fill up over here.
Yeah, and with Adam on 20, if we take a look at the damage that is on the board currently, the Murktide's a 5/5. The Psychic Frog can... Okay, I think there's only 1 card in the graveyard here for Christian. So if Christian, say, discards 2 to the Frog, maybe 1 of them is a spell, then you can exile 3 cards to the Frog. That will trigger the Murktide, because a spell is leaving the graveyard. So the Frog will be 3, the Murktide would be 6, that's 9. It would be interesting if Christian could get to 10 in the air here to put Adam on a 2-turn clock, guaranteed. And we are going to go, okay, so we're going to go into the red zone. And I wonder if Christian is going to do what I said and discard cards to make it a 2-turn clock. It looks like we are going there.
Yeah, I think you might be right. There goes Lorien Revealed. There goes Watery Grave, 2 counters on the Psychic Frog. There goes the Toxic Deluge, 3 counters on the Psychic Frog. There go those 3 cards from the graveyard. There's counters on the Murktide. Here comes the hit. Or you said it, a lot, enough to knock Adam down to a life total that he is probably dead next turn. He's at 9, and that'll do it. He's just going to scoop them up. Christian Valenti taking down game 1 cleanly with Dimir Murktide.
Yeah, I mean, that game really all came down to Harbinger of the Seas. Adam's mana was a little bit awkward there, had a bunch of non-basic lands, did have access to the Delighted Halfling for green mana, but didn't have the Nadu. And yeah, really just kind of got buried under that. And then Christian was able to find a Murktide and close out the game with that. But Yeah, let's take a look and see if we can get sideboards pulled up on screen because we're going to go to the post board games and we'll see what Adam has to work with. So, sideboard here for Adam: one Barenton Forge Tender. Is that a scheming fence? I think it is. Yeah, scheming fence, one soulless jailer, a kite sail larcenist. There's that Titania again, Corbin. A Teferi Time Raveler, a run afoul, two Spell Pierce, a Veil of Summer, two Dismember, a Vexing Bauble, and two copies of the One Ring. So, against blue black deck with a lot of counter spells and other interaction, presumably you would want this Veil of Summer, maybe Spell
Yep.
Pierces to fight over other counter spells. Teferi Time Raveler can sort of do a similar thing. And then I kind of think I like this Titania too.
I'm not going to lie, Titania does seem good here, right? You're going to fight over the first three or four things. You're both going to be kind of needing a big play, and Titania is a lot more impactful than drawing, a wall of roots or whatever else, right? You just need to give your deck some other hits when you can expect nothing but a wall of interaction from a blue black deck after boarding, right?
Yep.
Um, After that, I don't know. I don't know exactly where you want kite sail. Maybe it's just a uh, or I'm sorry, kite's the wrong card. This is you probably want to look at Teferi here as well, right? If you can get Teferi in play, bounce a frog, that's pretty good. There's some options for sure. What you want to cut is you just want to kind of board down them wherever you want to board down on your combo, but you need to be prepared now if you're Adam, and it's certainly being down a game is going to make things more difficult. It's going to be an uphill battle because the blue black deck, and we can take a look at Christian's sideboard here, but we saw how much interaction it was able to put up in game one, and that's just going to increase
Mhm.
in games two.
Oh yeah. So let's see. Let's take a look and see what Christian has to work with in his sideboard. So there are three consigned to memories, two stern scolding, three break the ice, a glistening deluge, two mystical dispute, a toxic deluge, two nihil spellbomb, and one unlicensed hearse. So stern scolding is interesting where it
Mhm.
can counter some of the smaller stuff, but doesn't fight over the Nadu, the Shuko, or any of the Court of Calling or Summoner's packs. That one, maybe you want that because just to fight over the mana dorks. And then past that, similar thing with Deluge, where it kills some of the stuff, but not everything. Mystical Dispute is pretty good at fighting over the card Nadu on the stack, so you might want to go
Yeah.
towards that. And then, as well as that Toxic Deluge, has got to be a slam dunk here.
Yeah, this certainly seems like, what, even if you get 5 more cards in or whatever, if you're Christian, wherever you decide to trim, you're gonna end up with a very, very high amount of interactive cards. So, this is gonna be either it's going to be a very fast combo for Adam or it's gonna be a very, very grindy matchup, right? Because Christian is going to, be determined to not get comboed out here. Um, with that said, we've talked and we had people on interview. We've told us we've had people obviously who have played this format and shared their stories. Everyone has the bad beat story of how Nadu won through X pieces of removal, right? Because it can just do that sometimes.
Mhm.
So that is to set the stage. These players are 5-1 here in round 7 of the NRG Championship Series. The winner looking very good for top 8. The loser going to have a big sweat for their last round.
Yes, exactly. And one thing I wanted to bring up here is that we mentioned in when we were discussing the preview of the match, where Nadu is very, very good. If you can get Nadu onto the battlefield, it's good against removal because every time you use a targeted removal spell on Nadu, you're always going to be up a card in the exchange. Well, if Nadu is never drawn or Nadu never hits the battlefield, then you don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. All right, looks like Adam also going to start a card down, it seems. Christian looking good over there. Dimir Murktide making a comeback here. I don't know, what's considered to be favored in the matchups here, but I will say that Christian looked like he was extremely prepared for how the matchup played out and what mattered in that first game, and made it look pretty good from the Murktide side.
Oh yeah. I think Adam has found a hand that he likes. We're going to start off with a Windswept Teeth and a Shuko. So interesting that we are going towards that instead of a Mana Dork. It's nice for Adam because doesn't have to worry about something like a Fatal Push on his turn 1 play.
Yeah.
And Christian also does not have a Force Negation. Now, looking at Christian's deck list, I just want to double check. I don't think there is any way to remove that from the battlefield. There is no Otawara. Okay, I lied. There's one Brazen Barber and two Sink into Stupor. So those are that's what we're looking at here for Christian.
Yeah,
If wants
technically
to,
answers is what I'd call those.
yeah, temporary answers. See what Adam's follow-up is here. Maybe something like Wall of Roots plus an additional 1-drop to get more stuff onto the battlefield. Maybe setting up for a turn 3 Nadu.
Yeah, he's certainly thinking about it, right? Putting a lot of
Yep.
thought into it. And you might just think, oh, you have a 1-drop, you slam your 1-drop. But we went for Shuko on 1, and now we played the 1-drop creature on 2, the Might. Let's put
Beatdowns.
Shuko on it. Yeah, sure. Why not?
This is what we call beatdowns. 2-1. Christian, what's your life total? 20. 10 turns. I'll see you in 9 turns. Lovely basics here. What are you more of a fan of, Corbin? I want to get your opinion on this. Are you a fan
Well,
of
for me
OG?
in this case, it's these Zendikar
Yeah.
ones. I'll tell you that.
Really? Okay.
I
OG
started playing
Zendikar.
around that time,
Okay.
and they were like the first full art lands I saw. And yeah, I think they're amazing. But we've been looking at that all day. We've had some nice altered lands. Will was saying from an Alterus that he enjoys earlier on camera. Like, what do you prefer here? Are you more these new school? Everything's awesome full arts. You like a nice clean. I'm not sure what set that is there for Adam. Is that
It's Urza's Saga.
there? You
Urza
go.
Saga. I'm a big fan of the sort of more older like these retro lands.
Mhm.
I have the one I've been using a lot of Portal basics. Portal, I don't know what it is, but Portal just has some really good basic land artwork. They're relatively inexpensive too. Maybe you can even find them from Nerd Rage Gaming as well. They might have some in their online store. Don't quote me on that because I don't know if they actually have them in stock, and Norm's going to yell at me if I say they did. But if they do, then you can go to the store and check it out. As we see a Nadu here from Adam being cast, and
Wow,
with Shuko on the
Adam
battlefield,
just pulling the trigger on it. No
yeah, fire
fear
it
into
off.
2 mana.
See, this is what we were talking about. Christian doesn't have a counter spell, has a removal spell, but Adam is up in the exchange, and Adam's kind of okay with that.
Go for
Actually,
the
up
throat,
even
needed a
more.
target, couldn't hit that Haywire Might.
Right, up even more because I forgot about the initial Shuko trigger. So even
Yeah.
basically, Adam is up 3 cards in that exchange because he drew 2 cards and got the go for the throat out of Christian's hand. So really good exchange here for Adam.
Yeah, just a casual 3-for-1 against a control deck.
I know, right?
That's a counterspell check. I mean, there's a massive difference there between and counterspell, that's for sure. And just like that, Adam's hand is refilled, and there's a second blue for Christian. Go ahead and shocks it in.
It
Let's
might
see
as
what
well
the
be
play.
as good as it might as well be as good as divination against Jund.
Yeah. Reasonable. All right, well, here we go. He just passes the turn back. So, all right, well, the damage was done. You got all the cards off of Nadu. Adam obviously comes out massively ahead in the advantage. That said, now Nadu is not in play. Christian has mana open. Keep the defenses up at the cost of your life total. Does Haywire Might beat down, which, by the way, is now up to 6.
Beats 6. Yeah, Christian's gonna die to the Haywire Might. That's what I'm saying. I think I
It
saw a
might just
copy
be
of
4, sorry, because of the shock, but it's getting there regardless.
close enough, Adam's hand's pretty good. Adam, I think, has Summoner's Pact, Endurance, Springheart, and Tugo. Got a lot of options here. You could go, if you have the 4th land, you could maybe go Summoner's Pact, play second Nadu, and try to draw some cards. Or you could just hold up the Endurance, which it looks like that's what Adam is doing. And I like this. You get Christian to fight on his own turn, make him tap some mana, and then maybe if Christian taps enough mana, you can figure you're safe to go for a Nadu. And if Christian doesn't tap mana, well, then you got 5 power, and he's at 14, so you're significantly increasing your clock.
All right, it resolves. Ships the go for the throat to the bottom. I did catch that Valenti just drew a spell snare there. Has a ton of cards in hand.
Yeah, he hasn't missed a land drop, right? Somebody did miss a land drop. No, Christian was on the
draw.
Okay. Oh, so Adam missed a land drop last turn. Okay, that's what it was.
Yes. So, and Christian, though, reduced to playing the Sink into Stupor, tapped as a land. Very on top of it with the untapping for Adam. Adam
Adam
does
did
hit a
find the
land
land.
there.
It's a fetch land too, so you could even go Springheart Nantuko into fetch land. We're gonna go for the wall. Yeah, you can go wall, then Springheart Nantuko, then play the fetch land. And this is good because that'll set up a really big Court of Calling here for Adam. But that's going to be met with a Spell Snare. So now this Springheart Nantuko is looking a little bit worse because now you have to play the fetch land first. So maybe doesn't want to go towards that. Maybe just... Okay, we are going to crack the fetch. Wonder what we're going here for Adam. And as I saw Adam thumbing through the deck list, I think I didn't mention this during the sideboarding, but the One Rings did come in as well, which yeah, those are pretty good in this matchup.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're certainly not under a ton of pressure in this, as you can see in this sort of middle game here from Valenti on your life total. So if you could actually sneak a one ring under, you're going to get some amount of value off of it, and the life total you can probably work with. So here we go. We had Spell Snare number 1. There we go with Spell Snare number 2. The beatdown.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Plan B is looking totally fine here for Adam. Just these these random beatdowns. Christian, if he takes 5, he's going to fall to 9, and yeah, we hit the fatal push the Haywire might.
I mean, that's actually a clutch fatal push for a bunch of reasons. One, that saving the damage is clearly not irrelevant at this point. You need all the life you can get, but also it's a nice mana efficient use of that 3rd mana there because Christian is now actually in a position to turn the corner. You're facing down just an endurance. You're untapping into a minimum of 4 mana, possibly 5. This is the chance to turn the corner. I see a sink into stupor at least. So with a little bit of life total to work here, Christian on Dimir Murktide with that fatal push to give himself a little bit of a window, now has an opportunity to take control.
Well, you mentioned Adam only has an endurance, but if we take a look at the mana base, there is that sneaky copy of shifting woodlands in the graveyard there for Adam. And if we take a look at the graveyard, we have artifact, creature, enchantment, and land with a Nadu ready to go and a Shuko in play. So that shifting woodland could spell the end, and Christian's going to tap out here to play that Murktide. Kind of has to put pressure in play, and we might just be going to game 3 here in just a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Adam might have saw it. Now he's rereading it because he went very quickly, seemed to have a plan. There we go. You called it. Turn it on. Copy here. But you have to not miss. This is one of those positions where technically the deck could miss.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee for sure. There's certainly you only have 4 triggers, so I would actually say it's kind of likely that the game's not going to be over this turn. Now that I think about it,
and look at that, very very much just no lands coming into play. That'll slow things down.
I think Adam might have a second copy of Nantuko, so you can go fetch Delighted Halfling. And then if you hit 2 lands off of the next 2 from the halfling, that's 2 mana to cast Nantuko. That'll give you 2 more. So there is a potential for Adam to still win this turn, but he kind of has to he basically has to play the halfling and hit runner lands off of the next 2.
Which is not, I mean, look, he just went 4 in a row non-lands. So there's definitely some in there. We're fetching one out now, but
there's a few.
It is well within the realm of possibility that Adam is able to get there here.
Thinking about what to fetch too, having a little bit of difficulty here. Basic count, there is only 2 basic forests in Adam's deck, so if he wants to get an untapped green source, it has to be a breeding pool. Okay, or Temple Garden, I guess.
Sure.
Nonetheless, it's a shock either way.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the clock too much because the Murktide's a 6/6, and I think the fetch shock puts Adam down to 13, and 13 is not a multiplicative of 2, right?
Yeah, and what Adam is concerned about, Cord?
Ooh.
Cord doesn't do it either, right?
Yeah, Cord doesn't do a ton here because the only 2 creatures you have untapped are the Halfling and the Endurance.
There we go. The others were, everything else was in hand, just revealed so Christian could write it down with a lot of information. Now, this is where that Toxic Deluge you mentioned would be pretty clutch for Christian to clear out a couple of the creatures, but even still, I guess that Shifting Woodland is kind of difficult to interact with, no?
Right. Yeah. Christian. I mean, Christian can't really interact with the land that well.
Yeah,
Well, hold on. Let me read the text on a card real quick. I forget the exact text. Now, break the ice is only lands that are snow or could produce colorless, and I believe the shifting woodland cannot
it
produce colorless. So
makes green. Yeah,
yeah. So never mind. I was thinking maybe Christian had it out, but I mean, it does have an out on the turn where Woodland is activated, can then use a removal spell once it
yeah,
is a Nadu, but has to wait for it. And like you mentioned, Toxic Deluge being one of Christian's better cards here, that Woodlands does dodge the Deluge, and that is
yeah,
big.
yeah. Instead, Christian just plays a frog, attacks with a Murktide coming in for some damage. This is a bit an interesting game, I guess, as much as Nadu comboing off can be, but it is not often that you see them whiff that hard on land. So they all of a sudden this game's somewhat interesting, especially if Adam has to kind of do the same thing next turn to reactivate that and then hope to not whiff again. A little bit of tension here, taking a hit from a Murktide.
Yeah, so I don't remember. Did we update Adam's life total after the fetch shock? I don't think we did. Because I thought Adam was at 16 before the fetch shock. Because I mean, it's not going to change too much with the clock. Okay, we're
Oh, looks
debating
like
over what
Adam's
we're
considering the
blocking.
block here.
That is interesting. So, essentially, willing to trade 2 Nadu triggers for 6 life. Hmm. Okay.
Well, the difference between this turn and last turn, despite looking obviously very similar, is that Christian now has access to 2 mana again, and I see a Fatal Push. So,
2 sneaky mana.
yeah, as you said, Fatal Push can target. So, will it still have a? If it becomes a copy of Nadu, will its CMC be 3 or 0?
It would still be 3,
Okay,
but if Adam were to spend a bunch of mana on, okay, what are we doing? We're going for the One
interesting.
Ring.
One ring.
Interesting.
All right.
Because I was going to say Christian doesn't have the ability to get Revolt here, so would not be able to use Fatal Push to kill the Nadu, but
Right.
could maybe use the Fatal Push to kill the Delighted Halfling. And there was also this interesting. Okay, oh right,
Well, I
the
totally.
Halfling made the ring uncounterable because that's what I was missing. So uncounterable ring, even Christian's counterspell not doing a ton against the Delighted Halfling. And then following up with a Wall of Roots. I'm getting confirmation from production that life totals are currently correct. So Adam on 16, Christian's life total probably doesn't matter that much, to be fair.
Well, for a while, it certainly looked like it would, right? He was
That's
getting beat down
true.
for five.
The Haywire might beat
Being
down.
super relevant. This game has certainly taken a turn since then. Adam's spamming out the board. And Adam has Court and Call in hand. And then we are going to get Fatal Push on Wall.
All right, so Walford is going to get taken down. Adam is going to use the ring in response while Christian is shields down on Bowmasters. That's pretty heads up from Adam. And then looks like Walford's is going to hit the graveyard, and then got a couple of halflings left over. And I think Christian's last card is Land Counterspell. And Counterspell not doing a ton against not only the Delighted Halfling making Nadu uncounterable, but also the copy of Woodlands, which can't be countered anyways. So Adam's got plenty of recourse against the card Counterspell.
Yeah, there's a lot of look. We kind of lumped Delighted Halfling in with all other mana dorks, right? But there's a lot of hidden power that comes in that little mana dork's ability, and it comes up whenever you forget about it. But
Oh,
there's a number in this deck. What is this?
that is a Glistening Deluge. From my from my time playing Standard, I know that card all too well. Glistening Deluge is 3 mana. It gives all creatures -1/-1 until end of turn, and creatures that are green and or white get an additional -2/-2. So it's a way to clean up all of the Delighted Halflings and make sure that Christian can keep all of his stuff. And that's huge because that means that if Adam goes for a Nadu next turn, there's going to be
Yeah.
a lot less triggers that he'd have
Yes.
access to.
Yeah, that's massive. Not only is that the perfect answer, just in general, it's a great piece of tech out of your sideboard. But in this particular circumstance, if he goes back to just activating the woodland as a Nadu to try to go back through that line, it's less mana, not just fewer triggers, but also less mana to play with after. So we'll see here. Spell Pierce, though, entering the hand now for Adam, along with a Veil of Summer. So
It's
shields
kind of
went up very quickly.
Yeah, it's also kind of funny that Christian has that counterspell as leftover, and Christian with the counterspell, seeing the Veil and the Spell Pierce, is got to be like,
Yeah.
he killed the deleted halflings to turn on his counterspell, and now it's back offline. But as you said, the mana constraints here for Adam are going to make the Spell Pierce and the Veil of Summer a lot harder to cast on this combo turn.
Yeah, look, we talked about in the sideboarding that Adam better be prepared to go deep into this because Christian's deck's going to be a wall of interaction. I mean, I'd say this is going pretty deep, activating your shifting woodland multiple turns in a row to start Shukoing for value, not to win. So this is a really well played and interesting game from both sides. That's for sure. Just a ton of cards in hand for Adam, but not really able to do much due to the mana constraints.
Yeah,
He's kind of just spinning his wheels without
yeah.
finding lands off of it.
Adam hit a ton of Nadu triggers this game and just really, really bricked on a whole bunch of lands. We're going to discard.
Wow.
Yeah, we just can't play anything. Crazy.
Okay.
And now with Adam on 15, Christian can fly the frog. There's 2 spells in the graveyard, so the frog would be... Ooh, cantrip is nice. So every cantrip Christian finds not only is one more, go a card
Yeah.
deeper with Frog, it's kind of break even with Frog, but it's one more point of damage for the Murktide because the Frog can exile 3 spells that'll pump the
Right.
Murktide X3. There's honestly a chance that Adam could take lethal this turn.
Yeah, and Preordain is a great one too. Just scry 2, then draw. You get a dig. We've seen already the power of digging and praying this tournament has worked out very well for people. And Preordain lets you get pretty deep. Here goes the combat. Big hit.
Some
Players
words being-
chatting about it
Yeah,
here.
doing a little bit
Christian
of chatting.
staring on the last 2 cards in his hand, looking over his graveyard. Maybe trying to figure out the math that you're talking about to figure out just what we can do with the Psychic Frog and the Murktide here.
So with 2 cards in hand, let's assume I didn't catch what the second card is, but if they're both spells, you discard 2 to the frog. That's +2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then there's 5 spells in the graveyard. 9 plus 5 is 14. That puts Adam down to 1, and the ring is on 1. So I think I think this might just be lethal. Yeah,
It seems like Christian's seen the same line you do.
Right, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, put Adam down to 1, and then he dies to his own One Ring. Crazy, crazy.
That's for sure.
Now, is there something that Adam could have on his upkeep with the ring trigger on the stack?
The might is in his graveyard. So
Yeah.
no easy life
Looking at the
gain.
deck list. Larcenous wouldn't do it. Scheming Fence wouldn't do it. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else.
Endurance shuffle the might chord.
Okay, yeah, you could go. Do you have enough mana? I guess you could pitch cast the Endurance.
That was, yes. That's the only possible line, I think.
There's no mana.
You need 5 mana to chord and activate the thing. So that is, yeah, you're on. Yeah. But I guess that's how you don't die here if you're Adam.
Oh, no, actually, chat brings up a very good point. So you can... Does that work? I don't actually know how this works, but if you... Right, if you woodlands to copy... Is there a One Ring in the graveyard? I don't think.
Yeah,
there
that's
is.
you could legendary rule out the one with counters, and then when the trigger resolves, you take 0. Is that what we're looking at?
You could also woodlands the Haywire Might, use the Haywire Might to kill the ring, go up to 3, lose 1 down to 2.
What absolute work the land is doing this game, huh?
This woodlands has looked insane. It was the best woodlands I've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure. You think they're limited cards until something like this happens.
Yeah, you think that the extra text on the card is just flavor text, but I mean, to be fair, Shifting Woodlands was a card that I think had a lot of buzz around it in spoiler season. A lot of people were talking about like copying Omniscience and all of these really, really big things that you can copy with it. And it turns out just copying 3-mana Simic cards is the best thing you can do.
Turns out, there you go. Check it out, Shifting Woodland Delirium you have to have, but once you have it, it's a Nadu, it's a ring, it's a Haywire Might, it's whatever you need it to be at the cost of all of your mana.
God, this is such a cool game. Whereas,
Yeah, I
like
agree.
you said, we've just had to see this. The shifting woodlands has done so much work this game. It's not only like allowed Adam to play around Fatal Push, it allowed him to play around counter spells, it allowed him to play around the sweeper, the glistening deluge that one
Mhm.
turn. Like it's kind of just done everything as we see Adam lining up some mana here. This is a very, very tricky turn. Have we not gone to damage yet? I wonder if we have. Not sure. Okay, I think we're doing stuff in
Failed a cycle.
phase. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll check it on the live totals, but safe to say one more hit will be lethal from Christian. So if we are there, we go. That's a
Oh, okay.
handshake from Adam. Christian Valenti
Interesting.
taking it down. Dimir Murktide moving to 6-1, looking very good for the top 8 right there. Very nicely done. What a match we just saw.
Yeah, that was a crazy match. Like, we got to see the shifting woodland in action. The shifting that card just did a ton of work for Adam. But at the end of the day, like you mentioned, had a bunch of opportunities to hit lands off the Nadu triggers and really just missed on a lot of those lands. You can imagine if Adam had access to more mana that game, able to
Yes.
deploy more spells, likely would have been able to cross the finish line. But it turns out Nadu can brick.
It's a very rare, but it can happen. All right, moving on. I think next up we are going to hit some ads. Uh, as a reminder, all of our winners get not just the prizes, the glory, the points, the invites, all of that. You get a custom token of yourself, courtesy of Inkland Tokens. Check it out. All Showdown winners will get one. We saw Dom Harvey's on camera earlier. You see Nikachu's there on camera. All of these winners, you're going to see these people again later this year, of course, at the championship series. And we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ultimate Guard, for helping make all of this possible and for, of course, creating some great products for us to use. Well, that I think is going to wrap us up for round 7. Devin, we are going to be back for round 8, winning ins for the top 8. All of it on the line coming up next round. So make sure, everyone, to stick with us and hit that follow button if you can. If you don't mind using those Prime subscriptions you have available, hanging out with us all day on Twitch. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your follows and your support. We'll see you on the other side for round 8.